Welcome to the PROCON podcast, hosted by Paul Vogels, with expert guest interviews, case study reviews, and insightful discussion topics. The PROCON podcast leads the project controls conversation.
Hello, welcome back everybody to the PROCON podcast. A next episode, and as you all know, we have 3 different teams: use cases, educational tracks, and the software specials. And in episode number 5, a couple of weeks ago, you have seen Safran on their risk tooling and additional tooling they have developed. But of course, a tool is not alone. It's people, it's processes, it's tools. And PROCON podcast, leading the project controls conversation, is also about the processes and the people. And today I'm having Michel Molenaar, one of the senior project controls consultants at Primaned, and also one of the teachers in risk management and probabilistic planning, as a guest. Michel, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Paul. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. So Michel, educated in business administration, have a big IT background. Yeah. More than 20 years in the profession. You all know we believe project controls is a profession. So more than 20 years in this beautiful profession. You are one of the risk experts, I think, or the risk specialist or enthusiasts within Primaned. And we are going to discuss one of the blogs we have posted also at the Primaned website, how project controls can reduce risk and project risk and project cost and improve your project planning, for example, with help to win more tenders. So thanks again, Michel. Yeah. First time in this studio, but I think this is not the first time in a studio, Michel.
No, for me it's not. As an amateur musician, I tend to record myself playing, and along with some singers, of course also performing. So a studio environment is not really that new for me. But even then, first time doing a podcast, so that's a new thing. Okay.
Well, that's great to hear. And we've been discussing this earlier. It's one of your enthusiastic things you like, but on the other hand, scheduling and risk is as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about the way 25 years in the profession, how risk got into the profession and how it evolved? Because at the end we all started with scheduling, but how it came into play.
Yeah, if I wind back the course of time to, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, we in the Netherlands had a very large project, which is the Betuweroute, which is a large infrastructure project in which we had to complete a railway line from one point to the other across the Netherlands. Yeah,
from Rotterdam into the German Ruhrgebiet.
German Ruhrgebiet, indeed. And that was one of the first projects in which, we delved into the risk analysis part. So, identifying potential events that might happen and what kind of impact those would have on the schedule. So that was, let's say, 10, 15 years ago or something. Yep. And after that, we saw that there was a real incentive to create more feasible schedules and create more risk awareness. So there's a lot of companies that really dove into that niche market of project controls. That was by then.
And who was the driver back then? Because if we look right now, Rijkswaterstaat, the waterway of the executive agency of infrastructure and water management, responsible for all the waterways and public works in the Netherlands, is a big scheduling and risk fanatic as well. They are driving this. Yeah. Was this also for the Betuweroute, for example? Did they ask this, or was it just something we as project controls enthusiasts liked?
No, I do think that they wanted to have more insight or get a more feasible dates, scheduling dates. So I do believe that they asked for these kind of simulations. And nowadays it's standard. It's a standard thing that all projects need to comply with, just to get more awareness of risks within a project, but also have an idea of the stakeholder management along with it.
Yeah, because if you look at the theoretical part, everybody is familiar with time, scope, and cost, budget. If you look at the 5 PMI knowledge areas, resources and risk are new knowledge areas.
Yeah.
Can you explain in 5 sentences why risk management helps to perform a schedule or to make it more feasible, for example?
If you look at the scheduling, the time factor, you do get more insights into estimations to get more feasible schedules. People become more risk aware. So, the estimation part of how long a certain activity takes, you can say, okay, it's minimum, it's maximum, or it's most likely. So, just asking this question first, that gets the people really start thinking about it.
Yeah, they start to discuss this.
That's a relative new thing, for someone.
So they start to discuss what if this happens? What's the impact on the estimate or on the duration or etc. etc. But it's relatively new. 10, 15 years ago, I think Beta Route is early 2000. It's a relatively new project controls by standard is a relatively new profession. So people need to grow into this. Is this something you see as well in the market? Are more organizations becoming more aware of risk management?
Oh, I believe so, because it's not only the analysis part and getting more acquainted with the feasibility of the schedule, but it's also identifying risks. What are potential dangers to the project, or are you being influenced by external factors as well?
Yep.
So it's raising the awareness among the entire project team.
Yeah.
So
is it always the external? Because if we do a lot of infrastructure projects in the Netherlands, that's where we are familiar and famous for. Everybody knows if it rains, it takes longer to pour concrete or whatever. But is it always external factors, or are there also internal processes?
Oh, it's certainly a lot of internal things as well. It's communication, it's estimation, it's scoping itself. So it's a lot of internal stuff as well.
Yeah. I always say if I look at your training sessions, for example, everybody overestimates their capabilities.
There's a constant biasing, going on.
Okay. And awareness, if we look at, back to infrastructure projects or construction projects, we need to tender. It's an open, public and private projects are more and more happening at the moment. There is a need for new roads, new buildings, etc. In the Netherlands, but also more in the European and I think internationally, we're talking more about most economically advantageous tendering. So it's not who's the cheapest, who's the fastest, who gives back the most to the local people, to the environment. Don't get real abroad people in the municipalities, etc. Then it's a must-have, because otherwise it's guessing in the dark.
It's guessing in the dark, but it's really focusing on risks is part of the initial thing of completing the project, but it's also thinking about the entire life cycle of for instance, an asset you're building. So what are the potential risks over there from an external perspective? Looking at all stakeholders. So does it really meet the end goal of a project? So not only the fixed scope that you're complying to achieve, but it's the long-term goal. And with the new contracts, because I think we are more getting into DBFM contracts, design, build, finance and maintain. So it's not just building and delivering an asset, but also maintaining it and even financing it. Then a risk now can be bigger later, or a risk which is not present in the first year, but with corrosion or with maintenance, it's there in 10 years. That's also something you need to take into account. You need to think about discount rates, internal rate of returns, net present value calculations. But really simulating that in the long-term goal.
Yep.
So that's something you have to take in mind.
Yeah. This means it's not that we have been talking about scheduling risk analysis. Yeah. It's also about cost risk analysis, taking what is the impact in money, for example.
Yeah, that's a fun thing. Yeah. We as a project controls organization have been long time associated with the scheduling and planning part. But there are other organizations as well that have been really looking into the costs analysis part. And the fun thing is, if you look at these two worlds, schedule risk analysis and cost risk analysis, we're doing basically the same thing, using some kind of different metrics. And for one, it's a euro. For us, it's an hour. But it's the same kind of simulations. And the really fun part is if you intertwine those things, if you do an integral risk analysis, then you'll see that the outcome of these both, so is it on budget and on time, the chances are even lower.
Because it's more difficult.
It's more difficult, and there's a real correlation between that. And that's something you need to manage as well. Fun thing is that, a lot of projects do these separately right now, but we do see a trend that the identification part already has those two intertwined with one another. Companies are asking us, hey, can you do both in the same tool set as a simulation?
As a simulation.
So they're going towards that path.
I read an interview, or it was a keynote that a big difference, for example, in kind of projects. The Olympics are always on time, never in budget. Commercial projects are never on time, but most of the time within budget, because that's where they make the money. Is the kind of project so influencing on how the approach is from scheduling or cost?
Oh, very much. We see a lot of categories of projects. If there's a project with a huge investment cost, then a company would really like to have enough information to make really important risk-based decisions. If it's a low-cost project, you're not going to do all these different simulated analysis. Just sheer risk indexing is probably enough. Because so there's a trade-off somewhere.
Maybe it's more costly to investigate than to take the risk, for example. Okay. In the tender phase, we talked about, does risk help to calculate the price? Does it make the feasibility more predictive? Because at the end, the tender is also about economic value, and you can transfer time into euros at the end. Because if we need to take a road out of operability, for example, it costs money to the Dutch.
There's always a penalty clause.
There's a penalty clause. There's a gain clause, etc. Can we say that in the tender phase it helps you to see if it's a possibility within time, scope, and money at the end, and within the execution, it's more about, okay, we set the block, we set the parameters, and now we are going to control them or see what impact or what actions do we need to take to keep the ship on course.
There's a big difference indeed between the initial tendering is creating all risk, identifying all risk, and hopefully getting a contract awarded.
That's important.
So that's the most important, number one, from a contractor's perspective. But an owner's perspective says, I want to have a contractor that is able to execute this and be aware of his or her risks. During the control cycle of a project, you'll see that there's there's a budget, and a budget is usually sliced up in an estimated element, like this is something we already foreseen. We also see that we have a reserve for when something goes wrong.
Which was not expected.
It was unexpected. So unexpected events, they have to be paid out of some sort of budget. And that, reserved amount of money, but also time. So it's not only, as we say it in our jargon, contingency. And contingency not only from a budget perspective, cost perspective, but also from a schedule perspective. That reserve, that needs to be re-estimated, reanalyzed, and sometimes even returned to the organization to go to invest in other projects, for instance, or whatever.
You said jargon. I think that's completely right. I hear a lot of terms for what maybe the untrained eye sees as the same: management reserve, contingency, sandbagging. I only give 80% of the budget because then I know I'll need to spend 100. There's a lot of theoretical approach to it. There's a lot of practical approach to it. Do you see the confusion in, well, this is an expected delay and this is something, well, we didn't expect at all. So why does it need to come out of another budget, for example?
There are things you've got foreseen things, things you might have foreseen, but you've also got the knowns and known unknowns. So things that have a very low likelihood of happening. And if they occur,
So it's good to educate one another, to talk about it, for example. And I think one of the things you always mention is the risk management session. Because if you look at how tenders and projects are being estimated, there's a qualitative part about risk management. There's a quantitative part. But first we need to determine what are the possibilities, what are the chances, what are the risks, etc. That's one of the few moments people are together.
That's what I see is that I led a lot of risk identification and evaluation sessions, and that's the first one is always an eye opener for a lot of people because it's some one specific day that is reserved, and all participants of the within the project, within all disciplines, are invited that first day, and then we have to talk about risks and dangers, etc. And they're always very reluctant to go because it's an entire day, and I've got so many other things to do. What kind of value would that add? And at the end,
it's boring.
It's boring, and at the end of the day, when they leave, they said, "Oh, it's a good thing we all sat along with each other and talked about the project. And I didn't know that you had the same kind of issues. And you can help me with this." So it's the risk identification sessions is also, a part of adding the communication channels, linking people together. So that's one thing.
And it's to raise awareness.
It's awareness, number one. So the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. That's one of my small lines memes I use a lot of times. So that's one. But that's just identification. But identification must be led by a risk manager, because it's a process in which you need to be guided in. People need to learn how to think about a risk. They need to learn how to raise a risk statement. So a risk statement is something like, if I foresee a certain potential event, I know, I have to know what the likely cause is, what the likelihood is, and the potential impact. And if you can put that into one sentence, it's picked up in certain parts, then you've got the real elements in there. So you've got the risk identification.
That's the risk statement. It's a large probability with a low impact, or a low probability with a high impact. Sometimes can lead to different conclusions.
But to be sure, the risk identification is not a one-time off thing. Everyone can raise risks during the entire project. Everyone, no matter what kind of discipline you are, if you see a potential risks, or in other words, you can also see a potential opportunity. Always identify them, always raise them in the risk register.
I think that's a new trend we are seeing. Everybody is always talking about risk and legal stuff and claims and changes, etc. But what we see in the market, in the trend, is that if you can do better than expected, you can benefit from that. For example, if there's always a penalty clause. If you don't do what you say you do, then you get a fine. But if you do better than expected, you get a bonus. That's something Is that the same principle, but then in a positive way, or is it a complete other way of thinking?
It's basically the same principle, but it's the other way around. That's what an opportunity is. The thing is that when adding or when estimating things, like durations, for instance, or budgets, a lot of people are already thinking about potential opportunities. So that's something that needs to be that they're already taking into account. But it's never written down. And when the opportunity does not arise, you'll see that it will take longer. So that's a risk in itself. So, but I do see that there's a trend and more of an emphasis on promoting opportunities but also from a contractual perspective.
Because it's incentivized by the contract by the owner. If you do better, then I'll provide a bonus for you. You said a couple of sentences ago, it's an eye opener. If I do every project is unique, but if I do my 12th turnaround or my 12th road, why don't I use the old risks I already written down and then say, well, the road is 10% bigger, so the risks are 10% bigger as well? Is it more complicated than that, or?
It's a little more complicated, and I do think you're not doing it with the exact same project team.
No.
So that's one of the goals, make them more aware of risks. And I do see a lot of tools nowadays that are focusing on risk registration. And risk registration you can use, of course, to make checklists of these potential risks that have been identified before, etc. And you can use these risk registers, copy and paste them from the previous projects. That's one, but it's not going to create the awareness. It's not going to focus or emphasize the project team on more communications, and perhaps they're also going to go lazy. This is the same list. That's something you don't want.
I have the same answer as my neighbor has, so I'm not. You need to be unbiased to say, well, it is a new project, it's a new time. Maybe it's not the same season, it's not the same underground, etc. There's always differences. You need to look into them.
You're not really triggered to start thinking out of the box. What potential things might go wrong.
So you need to have the checklist after you did the examination of the identification, for example, and say, did we forget something this time, which we have seen on a previous project, for example, more as, well, let's call it a conscious. So not, you need to start blank and then say, okay, did I miss something, instead of the other way around.
It's just a way of firing up the discussion even more or further or along a different route.
But if I look, PROCON is about people, processes, and tools. There are a lot of new tools on the market from big project controls organizations like Safran and like Oracle and PM Web, which are part of this podcast as well. Benchmarking, data warehouses. There is data to be collected to say, can I get my estimate better, or did I forget or overlooked at the risk? How do you look at capturing that data, store it as a benchmark? Is that something you see happening in the future more and more?
Oh, definitely. If we're going to look at storing all these registers, but the real thing is that we need to register when risks really occurred. So that's something that's a little troublesome yet. We a lot of focus on identifying potentials, but registering on things that have occurred is a little harder. But I do see that that information is when you capture that within risk databases and risk registers, you can really start analyzing these things and build up information and potentially. You have artificial intelligence give you some sort of a forecast or a potential analysis and strategies. There are potentials, but
what does this ask from the team, from the PMO, if you want to call it that way, or the project controls team? What does that what kind of a guy or a girl do you need in the team to be able to look into those analytical parts or into this data part? What kind of people do you need in that team?
Yeah, that's a fun thing, is that you've got a person that's more on the risk management side, which is more process and communication and let's say a people person.
Yep.
And then you've got
a green, if you're looking at this, more a green
greenish,
energy.
Yellowish. Yeah.
Yep.
If you look at the Discovery Insights or whatever it's called nowadays, they've got a couple of versions from there. So that's more of a people person.
Yep.
So supportive and innovative and for enthusiasm. And then you've got the other side, which is more of the analytical and statistical person. So that's we're calling colors blue as dark, the bluest as blue can be.
Yeah.
And that person is really focusing on doing the simulations and running the analysis. So that's a really different kind of person.
Yeah. But he needs to inform her, so the risk analysis needs to inform the project team or the project manager or the risk manager. Hey, if I look at my data and if I look at the models, it can be a weather model or whatever, I anticipate this is going to happen, or the likelihood that this is going to happen is going up or going down, or etc.
Yeah. So he or she is really is focusing on the data. It's only on the statistical level, and needs to be aware that communication-wise, it's a really black box.
Yep.
You as a statistical engineer know what the black box does.
Yep.
But a lot of people are not going to understand that. You need to be very aware of what you communicate and how the communication can be and should be interpreted.
Yep.
A nice example of that one is a lot of people know the term P80 or P85. That's a percentile risk. It's like this is the likelihood of a certain date, the 80% chance date that a project should finish. Will finish on schedule or from a probabilistic schedule. But most people don't know that it's an 80% likelihood of hitting that date or before. It's just the emphasis on the or before part.
Yeah.
So it's knowing how to communicate that.
Yeah, but that's more on expectation management. So the project team with the manager, who's the communicative, let's call him the soft part of project management. We have the hard skills, the real project controls engineer or the scheduling engineer or the risk engineer, etc. They need to think about this is the hard data. How are we going to put this into the stakeholder? Because if you say, well, there's 80% chance we're going to make it in time or before, stakeholders might say, okay, that's a little bit low because 20% I'm not going to make it, or I'm over-delivering, etc. So communication and analytical part is very, very aligned, should be aligned?
Should be aligned, but should communicate what is expected and how these figures should be treated.
Yeah. In the academy, we talk about Tshaped Professionals. You need to understand the concept of scheduling, for example, and you can be an expert in risk, for example. Also, your manager projects should be aware of how can risk or scheduling help me? Is because they don't need to learn every detail about it. How do you see the understanding of scheduling and risk techniques at the, let's call them the management part of the project, the manager projects or the manager project controls? Do they understand enough of it, or can it be better?
I think it can be better. I'm not going to say that it's that they're completely out in the dark and blind. Mm-hmm. But I do see that there's potential for growth.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it nicely in that. Yeah. We talked a little bit about tooling. There's a lot of change in tooling with cloud transactions. People are going more into cloud. More computing power is available. More data history is available. Yeah. Also in the process, I think there is a change. I was talking to Richard Wood of Safran, and I will be talking to Russ Buke from Oracle, for example. They are very strong on risk analysis as well. Yeah. I think those two have a very strong product on risk analysis, on the blue part, on the statistical part. But they are also moving into the soft part. Is it a precondition for a good analytical exercise to have the qualitative part and track? Does tools help you with that?
You need to have some sort of a risk register.
Yep.
Yeah, the identification part of risks that needs to be as easy as possible. Everyone needs to be able to raise a risk and put it on a website or
Yep.
put it on an Excel sheet or whatever.
Yep.
I've seen hundreds of different types of identification tools.
Are people resilient to raise a risk? Because they are trying to help their boss.
At first, yeah, but it's that's the barrier that governance thing is that's lowering. So people are more eager to raise risks or make other people aware. So it's lessening.
Yeah.
So.
Is that a Dutch thing, or is that an international, a European or an international thing? Because Dutch are very direct. Everybody can talk to everybody. I can talk to the CEO of a company, say, "Well, I see a risk."
It could be a cultural thing. It could be.
Yeah.
I'm not experienced enough to know within the international part.
Yeah.
So,
If you look at international. In the international aspects, the US is very famous about their claim culture.
Yeah.
If I always say the joke, if I put the dog into the microwave to dry it and it's not in the manual, I will put a claim at the microwave manufacturer that they didn't put it into the manual. If you look at Europe, I think with Rijkswaterstaat, for example, being a big driver about probabilistic planning, we should be very high in the awareness ladder in the European continent.
I think the Dutch culture, the Netherlands really are in the lead regarding scheduling risk analysis at first. That's
Yep.
because that's a thing that I've been dealing with a couple of for the past 10 years.
Yep.
I think we're in the lead for that. Yeah, certainly. But as we are Dutch, we're not really shouting that from the rooftops. Huh?
No, we're very modest, of course. But
Modest,
that's why we have this podcast to say.
Well, we're great, but we're also very small.
Yeah, yeah.
And that may be one of the elements, because we are just with 17 million people, small area. So hey, we're the ideal environment to experiment these things with, and so that's why I think the Dutch way of working regarding risk management, risk analysis, is a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as a conclusion, we might say, okay, there is the appetite for risk should be bigger, or to talk about it. The awareness should be raised, of course. Mm-hmm. Are there specific organizations or type of organizations where we can learn from? Is there, at the top of your head, without any references, but can you see an organization where you say, well, I assume, and I know what assume means, it makes an ass of you and me, but I assume in this type of organization, risk analysis is very high promoted.
I have the idea, and I've seen some letters and some articles as well from an international perspective that, for instance, an organization like the NASA Institute or ESA, a European Space Agency, they are in the wave. They're really in the lead for these types of things. The thing is that I've seen certain graphs as well that really also made me more aware of, like, hey, I can communicate this in another way as well, like budgeting or risks. But they're scientific guys.
Yeah, they calculate everything. They calculate the lunch,
and it's in their brains constantly. So let's say the leaders, so the managers all have most of them probably have some sort of a scientific and bluish background. Yeah.
And probably because it's hard to fix a risk. If a cubic meter of sand is in position right, it's easy to move. But if there's something on the moon and you need to fix something, it takes a while.
Yeah.
And so the impact is very high in that case.
So feasibility and insurance has to be way up there.
Yeah.
So literally.
So I think we start this blog according to a recent survey, 93% of the project planners believe that project controls are important. I think we can state after 30 minutes, being more aware is the first step, and then being more proficient in this are second and third steps to grow even as Dutch in this maturity ladder.
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michel. Everybody who is listening, thank you very much as well. Please subscribe to the PROCON podcast website, where you are triggered when there is a new podcast live. You also can subscribe to the basic platforms, Google, Spotify, Apple, etc. Keep in touch. If you have a real great project to talk about, please send me an email at podcast@primaned.com. We're more than happy to have real use cases on this discussion in the studio via Zoom, or we can even move to you. If you have a great place to be, we can move the studio to you. We're very interested in new use cases. Please keep listening. Thank you very much. Michel Molenaar, a senior project consultant at Primaned and teacher in probabilistic planning and risk management. Thank you very much, and talk to you the next time.
Thanks for listening to the PROCON podcast. To listen and watch more episodes, you can subscribe and access the resources mentioned in this episode by visiting proconpodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode, where we will continue to lead the project controls conversation. The PROCON podcast and the associated resources is published under copyright to Primaned. All rights reserved, no reproduction of this content is permitted.